So this month, we are using the book. It's a classic book that was written in the late 1800s. It's written by one of the first doctors in the United States called H. Emily Cady. She started writing lessons. She contacted the co-founders of Unity, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who were putting out a little kind of an interfaith New Thought newsletter, and she asked about having one of her articles posted in it. It was so successful, they asked her would she write a series of those, and she did over a couple of years. And then in the late 1800s, the first book that Unity ever published was called Lessons in Truth, and it was the accumulation of those articles that she had written. It's still considered one of the foundational books of New Thought. Now you understand it was written in a time when we didn't have the frames of reference and the languaging we do today, but there are a lot of jewels that are in this. And so this month of August, we're using this for a foundational study series, which is always so helpful to really dig in a little bit deeper to some of those foundational ideas. Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, had a saying. She said, "As lives the flower in the seed, so lives the Christ in me." We're going to break that apart today to understand what did that really mean. Because, every person on the face of the earth, I believe at some point in another says, why am I here? Not just like, why am I here right at this moment, but why am I on earth? Where did I come from? What's the purpose of our life? That we all grapple with that, right? There's a story of a family where the young girl went to her mother and said, "Mom, where did I come from? Like, where do all people come from?" And the mother said, "Well, honey, God created Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve had children, and their children had children. And so we all came from them. We came from Adam and Eve." The little girl was kind of pondering that, and a little bit later she was in the garage with her dad, and she said, "Dad, where did I come from? Where do all people come from?" And he said, "Honey, well, the world was created and began to evolve." And he said, "We actually came from primates." He said, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, like monkeys. We came from monkeys and from primates." And so the little girl scratched her head. That was not anything like she'd heard before. And she went back to her mom and said, "Mom, I asked you where we came from, and you said Adam and Eve, and Dad said monkeys. Which one is it?" And she said, "Oh, honey, that's simple. I told you about my side of the family." And he told you about his side of the family. It's a great way to enter that discussion of what is my source? Where do I come from? Because when we do that, what we're doing is we're trying to get an understanding of ourself. And what are we connected to? What's possible for us? What is supporting us? And all of these things, whatever you believe about yourself, the nature of yourself, where you've come from, how you may or may not be connected to some greater source, if there's a purpose in your being here, it really shapes and influences how you show up, far more beyond what we may realize. And that the other thing is that I will never forget, Ram Dass, the great teacher, said we all go through our somebody training, that we're all born little somebodies belonging to somebody else. And so we grow up with stories. We grow up with hand-me-down beliefs. How many of you know what a good old worn-out, hand-me-down belief is? Hand-me-down belief that you just took on as you're young. And we pick them up from society. We get them from family, from friends. Today, a lot comes in from outside influences. And then there's our experiences. When we have experiences in our life, well, if I do this, that happens. We begin to think that this equates to this. And so all of those things, our beliefs, our stories, our experiences, it is what really informs and constructs our sense of being, who we think we are, what we think is possible, how we think we can show up. But the question becomes, is it real or is it Memorex? Is it really based on the truth of our being, or is it based on something else? And how to have languaging to begin to even have the conversation within our own self. How to have some tools to begin to sort out and bring awareness to the things that we've been told that maybe we could or couldn't do, that maybe we were good or worthy or not. To know, is that really true? Or is that just somebody's opinion? And is there a higher truth that I can live into? The best analogy for us to use, as Myrtle Fillmore said, as lives the flower in the seed, so lives the Christ in me. So let's talk about a seed for just a moment. When you look at a seed, no matter if it's a tiny mustard seed or if it's a bigger avocado seed or if it's a piece of corn, which is a seed, when we look at these seeds, a seed is really a promise. It's a package of potential. It is so much more than just a seed. That when you look at a seed, you realize that that seed is actually the pattern, the potential, the energy, the intelligence to become the mighty oak tree, or to become the fragrant rose. Or perhaps that seed is the seed to become a wonderful watermelon, or perhaps a squash, or perhaps a blade of grass. But when you look at the seed, if you look at an acorn, you don't shake it to say, I can't hear the oak tree in there. It's not in there. Or you don't, shake the watermelon seed and say, I can't hear there's not a little watermelon in there. You would laugh at that. Well, we too are seeds, sons of the Creator, daughters of the Creator. We are the image and likeness. An image is a pattern, is a blueprint, is a seed. And so if we are these seeds, so often we look at ourselves like if we were a chocolate chip, and if we could just ever find that one little chip that has to be in there somewhere, that I must have a chip of divinity within me somewhere. Well, that's the equivalent of thinking that a watermelon seed has a little teeny watermelon in it somewhere. But when we begin to think about that we too, there is a seed for the human spirit being. And in unity, we call that seed the Christ. Christ is the anointed one, the anointed self. It is the pattern of human spiritual perfection manifest. And that just as with any kind of seed, the way that the potential is found within us is it is in the reality of our being. It's not just one little piece within you. It is your very constitution. Just like the watermelon seed, its very constitution, if placed in the soil, and if the conditions are right, the potential will begin to be realized. And so it is with us. There is a seed. You can call it the higher self, the divine self, the original face, whatever you want to call it. That when we begin to nurture the inner reality of our being, a whole new level of expression begins to take place. Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you, meaning that it's in the reality of your being. And so there's an ever-present essence, an intelligence, an energy, a potential that is an inherent part of us that is awaiting the right potentials to come to life. So Emily Cady, the author of this book, very much believed that and had that understanding. And she coined some languaging to help the audience at the time begin to understand it. And what she wrote, she said, every individual believes they are in bondage to the flesh, meaning every individual believes that, in her words, that we believe that we are made of flesh, a physical being, and that limits our potential. Every individual believes they're in bondage to the flesh and to the things of the flesh, and so they are as long as they believe it. And the key there is as long as they believe that that's all there is to them. And so she introduces two concepts that are crucial to understanding our being. And the two concepts that she introduces are individuality and personality. Now, I'll bring you kind of up to date of what they would be today, but I want to describe it the way she says it. Individuality, as Emily Cady describes in the book Lessons in Truth, is the true essence of being. It's the part of us, the spirit, that is eternal, unchanging, divinely connected. It is the seed of potential within us, the divine spark that knows no limit. The individuality, according to her, is the I am, or the Christ pattern of human spirit perfection and the energy that brings it to life. It's the I am within us. Hinduism calls it Atman. Buddhism calls it the original face. They're speaking of the same thing. She says individuality is that unchanging, eternal part, the real self that is holy, perfect. And then there's the personality, which comes from the word persona. The personality is the outer expression. And the personality is what gets shaped and conditioned by our beliefs and our stories and our experiences. She says the personality changes, but the individuality within you is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The personality is the house you live in, the consciousness that you embody, but it can constantly change. Personality is often mistaken as our true self, and yet it would be sort of a liken to a light bulb, that there's a light and something that illuminates within it. And if we call that the individuality, the I am, the divine spark, the perfect pattern, the seed of all we are, it still needs it needs some form in order to hold it so it can illuminate. And so she says there's the form and the awareness of the form, and then there is the inner reality, the greater being. She says when we overly identify with our personality, we hold on to beliefs and perceptions that are not in alignment with our true self. Yet if we can realize that it's just stories and conditioning and experiences and reactions, if we can just realize that, we can make space and begin to live from a deeper part of ourself. Now, that's the late 1800s. If you flash forward to today, 3 current people, how they would describe something very similar. Carolyn Myss, her last name's spelled M-Y-S-S. If you're familiar with her, she's a great teacher and writer. She echoes the same sentiment. She says the ego or the personality often clings to wounds and narratives that we believe define us, yet they're not our true selves. She said your biography can become your biology if you don't know that you are more than that. That's how she says it today. Father Richard Rohr says our true self is hidden beneath the false self. Our personality has been shaped by our ego in the world around us. He describes the false self as the small self, the part of us that is preoccupied with survival, success, saving face, and security. Now think about that. How much energy that the world puts into survival. Not that we don't want to survive, we do. But survival, success, saving face, and security. And then Tara Brach, my favorite Buddhist meditation teacher. She talks about many people live in the trance of unworthiness, that they have deeply ingrained beliefs that they're not enough, and that they live from a sense of severed belonging. And what she does is teach people to come home to our true selves beyond all the noise, beyond all the conditioning, and to recognize that our essential nature is more than our conditioned identity. How many of you can relate and you can feel some understanding around those two aspects of yourself, the true self and that part of us that is conditioned? And so the question becomes, well, how do we awaken our seed potential, our Christ potential, this higher self? How do we have this as the foundation of our being and not so much the part of us that is our personality and the collection of all that we just simply think we are? She says, to attain any desirable results, there must be some kind of internal movement, a conscious direction of mind. I had one of the most powerful experiences around how much this really impacts a person in my first ministry. My first ministry was in Lawrence, Kansas. And Lawrence, Kansas is home of Kansas University. And we had quite a few professors that would attend a church. And quite often we had a number of students that came through the church, most of the time because it was a religious studies class assignment. And as a part of their religious studies assignment, they would need to go to different churches, synagogues, and Unity there was the only New Thought one in the town, and so we were different, and so we caught a lot of them coming through. And I loved that, but honestly, very few of them, they didn't stay long typically. They came, got the assignment done, and went on. But there was one young woman that came through. Her name was Eunice Lee. She came the first Sunday, and when she went through the line, she introduced herself, told me she was a student from Korea that was able to be in Kansas taking some classes at the university, and this was part of her assignment. She felt the need to inform me, and I really appreciated it and told her she was welcome anytime. And so I noticed she came back the next Sunday, and she diligently took notes. But Eunice, unlike many of the other students, she continued to come, and she brought another person with her who was also from Korea. And so the two of them would come. They diligently took their notes, and I kept thinking, I don't know what kind of assignment they've got, but boy, I might need to see that one. What's that? She kept taking notes and kept coming. After about 3 months of coming faithfully, one Sunday she asked if we could set up a meeting, and I said I'd be happy to. So we scheduled a meeting sometime during the week. And when she came in and she sat down in my office, she again introduced herself. I'm a student, I'm here, I'm from Korea. And she said, I need to clarify something. She said, if I'm understanding what you are saying that I have a soul. Well, first of all, it never occurred to me that anybody would ever in my whole lifetime ask me, do they have a soul? So I was really learning in that moment. She said, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you've said, she knew exactly how many Sundays I'd come. She had a notebook full of notes. She said, if I'm understanding you, you're saying that I have a soul. And I said, yes, Eunice, I believe you have a soul, and I believe all people have a soul. She said, that's what I hear you saying, because if I'm hearing what you're saying that I have a soul and that everybody has a soul. And she said, and if I'm understanding what you're saying, what that means is that the real, true part of me, like the seed of what I was born to become if it was never hindered, that the real part of me is good, and God loves me, and that I'm okay at that level, and it's not just me, but you're saying that every person on the earth is like that at the core of their being, that they are all blessed, and God loves everybody? Is that what you're really saying? And I said, absolutely. And she looked at me, and the tears began to stream on her face, and she said, if that is true, then my whole life is about to change and get better in ways that I never knew were possible. And she said, may I tell you my story? I said, please. And I do have her permission to share. She said, I was born in Korea. My parents were very young. And they had me immediately, and then they did something that is almost illegal in Korea, where I'm from. They divorced. And she said, that is, in my culture, that's the worst thing that could happen to a man or a woman. She said, my mother, if anyone knew that my mother had been married and had a child, she would never be married again. And so my mother had to basically disassociate and disown me. Otherwise, she couldn't have moved on with her life. And so soon after I was born, my mother's family left me on the doorstep of my father's family. But she said the father's family also wanted no evidence that he too had been involved in a previous relationship. And she said, all I ever was evidence of something that should have never happened. And she said, so I would go, this family would literally take me and leave me here, and they would tend to me just a little bit. Both families agreed they would act like I was just somebody they were helping. And they would drop me off, and until I was about 7 years old, I went back and forth. She said, I learned at my school that there was something called an orphanage. And so finally the day came when they dropped me off at my father's house again and they drove away. I picked up my own bags and I walked and found the orphanage. And she said, I went to the orphanage because at least they wanted me to be there. Now just let that sink in a minute. That's a real story by a real woman, a young woman, college age, who managed to have her name drawn so she could travel to the United States to take a religious studies class, and she wound up in Unity Church of Lawrence. But this is the part that really got me. She said, so that's who I am. And all my life I've known that I was a mistake. Nobody ever wanted me. Everybody's been ashamed of me. And what I've done is I've focused on education. It's the only thing I've ever had, and so I've really studied hard. I've poured myself into education, and it's such a privilege and honor to even get to come to the United States because it's much more free here. And she said, what I'm really getting, if all of these things, like the mind of an attorney, she was deducing, if this means this, means this, means this, she said, then is this true? She said, Reverend Darlene, does that mean that there's no bad people in the world, but there are people in bad places? I said, Eunice, I am in awe because I could not have said it better myself. As a matter of fact, may I quote you forever, that there are no bad people, just people in bad places. When she said that, it's like, yes, I got it. And she got it. And I'm telling you, that woman changed. Marty Stimmerman was our administrative person there, and she can tell you, Eunice brought her friend. They gathered materials. They learned everything they could with the goal of going back to Korea and spreading the idea and telling people, you have a soul. And no matter how bad they act and how bad they treat us, they're just in bad places. But it freed something for her. And I thought, how liberating for us if we could tap back into the miracle of that truth, that there's a dimension within us that can never be bad. We can be lost and we can lose sight of the truth of who we are. We can never discover it. I truly believe there are people that live their whole life fumbling around at the surface level and never ever tuning in or paying attention to who we are. And so this week and then next week, we really want to look at some of the hows here. So just very quickly, what is it that keeps us stuck at that surface level? And then how do we begin to realize, I keep using the analogy of the seed, but it's a part of our essence. If there is more to us and that more wants to come to life, in the scriptures it's called the fruits of the Spirit. If it wants to flower in your life as the fruits of peace, of inner peace, of compassion, of love, of understanding, of beauty, of abundance, of divine order, if it wants to flower in your consciousness, in your life, what a beautiful life, what a beautiful being to walk around and live in a state of peace. Live in a state that says, all is well in my soul. That there may be trials and tribulations, but ultimately all is well. And that I'm in touch with that, and therefore I do my best to bring it into every day. So Jesus must have met somebody like Eunice Lee, or some of the disciples were asking questions about the truth of our being. And this is recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, as a bunch of people had gathered around and he was teaching. And this is what he said. He said, "Consider this. A farmer went out to sow seeds. And as the seeds were being scattered, some fell on the path, and birds came along and just ate those up. Some fell on rocky places where they didn't have much soil. They did try to spring up, but the soil was so shallow that and the sun came, they couldn't withstand it because they had no roots. And then some seeds fell in thorny places, and when those thorns grew up, it choked out the plant. But other seeds fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100-fold, 60, 30-fold times what had been sown." And he said, "Whoever hears this, whoever can listen to this, let them really hear it." So what does it mean? Well, this is about if the seed that he is talking about is to be in touch with and nurturing the potential of our being, our individuality, the Christ self, the original face, the gifts of the Spirit. If the seed is that, and our goal is to have it in fertile soil so it could come first, well, this is telling us we have to pay attention to the things that cause it to go by the wayside. That where do we lose ourselves, and where do we lose touch with that? And so the first one is the seeds that fall on a path. To me, the path is when we ourselves identify with the status quo, with the path and the patterns of the world. There's a scripture in Romans that says, "Don't be confined to the patterns, the paths of the world, but be restored by the renewing of your mind." And so the first place we tend to lose it is when all that we see and what we see just taking on the path, if that's all we're focused on, and the patterns, we get stuck in our own patterns and our own conditioning, our own worn out habits. If we lose ourselves and our own habits and our own conditioning and our own patterns, we lose ourselves. We never go deeper. The second one, he said, when they fall on rocky places, that one's pretty obvious because what he points out is when there's no roots. What that simply means is when we're living at the surface and we never nurture the true roots, the true seed of our being. And then the third one is the thorns. I call that the cares of life. When the day in, day out, be it a hardship or be it just the cares of life, have you had the cares of life just keep you so busy being busy that you don't really even have time to go beyond the surface? All of these things are just examples of things that keep us stuck at the surface level. And what really the teaching here lies, there's a fourth option, and that is a receptive, integrative spirit. That is the place that we begin to grow into our greater being. Now let's go back to nature. When you look at that, how does that happen? Let's suppose we take that watermelon seed and we bury it in the ground, and we have nice soil, we have water, we have sunshine. In order for that to begin to grow into a watermelon, what has to happen? It has to crack open. It has to lose its identification as being a form. It can't stay just a form, just this fixed little idea. It has to give way and integrate itself with the earth, with its source. It has to be in communion with the sun and the earth and all of these things, and it must be willing to continually let go. to let go of the form, to let go of what I looked like yesterday, to let go of what we did yesterday, to let go of what I believed yesterday. It's a continual letting go and nurturing the truth of my being and growing from that place. When we're integrated with the earth, with the source of our energy, with the activity of life, which is the Holy Spirit, our focus is bringing forth our potential. And when we do this, our divine potential will not only take root, but will also grow into a life that bears abundant fruit of the Spirit, peace, love, spiritual fulfillment. Sarah and Beth, would you join me? And so the seed of the divine potential is within us, always ready to grow. The only question is, are we preparing the soil of our lives? And are we creating the conditions that allow our true nature to manifest? So next week, we're going to look at some more, how do we do that? But this week, I want to invite you to think about the part of you. Use the analogy of the seed. If there is far more to the seed than that little form, there is a wisdom and intelligence and integrity, a pattern of becoming. There is something in it that cooperates with life, that when it's placed in the right conditions, you don't have to add any, it just does its thing. And so it is with us. To identify with the part of you, with the dimension of your being that is that. Because you and I, my friend, also have a pattern for becoming. We call it the Christ in unity. The Hindus call it the Atman. The Buddhists call it the original face. You can call it whatever you'd like, but there is something within us that is wanting to grow us. How many of you can feel that and just know that it's time to let go of some of the things that hold us back? To let go of some of the ways we get caught up in our conditioning and our habits and our limiting our own self. We're going to lead you in a medley of 2 songs in order to take this into a time of meditative prayer. This first song is one that I wrote that are ways that I lift my spirit to the forefront of my awareness in the midst of whatever's going on in life. Join me with it. Sing with us if you will. I lift my spirit when I look up, and I lift my spirit as I bow down. I lift my spirit as I set myself free. I lift my spirit, and spirit lifts me. And from this place, this begins to flow. Peace, light, and love. Peace. In me, sing peace, sing it out. Peace, light, in me. So I lift my spirit, and Spirit lifts me. So I invite you to close your eyes for just a few moments as you turn your awareness within. As lives the flower and the seed, so lives within me the seed of my spirit, the seed of my becoming. It is that blueprint, that pattern that is the perfect image and likeness of the Creator as it would express in human form. And that pattern is present in every human being. It is there waiting for us to die before we die. Now, not a physical death, but to die to the illusion that all we are is a physical being, a form. That just as the seed goes into the ground, it lets go of its form. It lets go of identifying as that and tunes into itself as potentiality. And so we come to know ourselves as holy potential, divine potential, as human spirit being. And that means that what has ever been demonstrated by anyone that has walked this earth, be they saint or be they sinner, that every being is capable of going there. And so our goal is to decide which do we want to demonstrate. And I believe you choose the path of spirit, the path of love. And so we let go of identifying ourselves solely based on anything else other than potentiality here in human spirit form. And the more often I can give myself over to the ground of my being and integrate myself as part of the creative, as I give myself over, I am opening myself to realize and express those higher states of being. For we are here to be light. We are here to be love. We are here to be harmonious. We are here to be constructive and joyful and beautiful. We are here for these things. It is a part of our nature. It is a part of our potential. And it is what makes our soul sing. And so may we spend time going within and giving thanks for that part of us that is always showing us just how to let go and integrate ourselves as a part of and as an expression of, and to bring that awareness back to wherever we are. And when we find ourselves getting caught up and consumed and overshadowed by cares, by what everybody else says, by the reruns that run in our head, by our own inclinations of how we're more inclined to do stuff, we take a deep breath and say, oh yeah, that's just Memorex, but I'm real. So I'm going to call upon that. So I lift my spirit as I look up, and I lift my spirit as I bow down, and I lift my spirit. You sound beautiful. As I set myself